month of unity, and I want to talk today about unity through diversity. I spent last weekend with my grandkids and great-grandkids, and I only had 2 daughters, and I ended up with like 7 grandchildren and 5 great-grandchildren. So it was really interesting because we've got this family of in and outs and halves, and we spent all Saturday night sitting out on the lawn. And one granddaughter's going to get married, and they all have their phones and their tablets and this great thing happening. And it was a real picture for how we come together, even though we're all so different, finding the things that we can do. Like I've got a grandson who does rap music. And, you know, between their language and my language, it was like my parents and Elvis Presley kind of gap. But if you listen without worrying about the words, it's great music. It's great rhythm, and that he can come up with all of that and put it together. And that's what I want to talk about today, how we connect, how we see that in each other. What does unity look like? We talk about it a lot, and I was thinking about different examples so we could get a good idea of unity through diversity. I remember when I was a kid, I grew up out in Sanger, and we had international dinners every year. And everybody was different. We had all kinds of different food, and everybody made it, and it was so wonderful. And that's what I love about the Central Valley. You can just get about anything here. I went to the Midwest, and I gotta tell you, it was boring. I mean, everything was white, and one kind of food, and one kind of everything, and you couldn't get, you know, Japanese. You couldn't go down the corner store. My first husband was in the service. We'd go to Georgia. You couldn't get Mexican food, which we lived on. And you could get Cuban, but you couldn't get flour tortillas. We finally got a fast food place in, and I paid like $18 a dozen because I wanted flour tortillas so badly. I eventually learned how to make them, and they looked like maps, so I'd use a bowl and cut around the bowl so I could make circles. But it's fun seeing that, and I want to share some examples of how it is, how you look at it. Think of a house. We all call it a house, or a home, but every one of them looks different. If you're in the front yard, it looks different from the backyard, and you wouldn't think you were describing the same house. Or all the rooms are different, and the windows are different, but it's still a home, and we can recognize what that similarity is, how it comes together, how we work together, how all of it, no matter what it is, you can put your individual stamp on it, but there's a structure that is the same. And that's where we find the unity. Think of your body. We're all made out of the same thing, but it's different. I mean, my heart doesn't look like my liver. My liver doesn't look like my spleen. You know, my feet look different than my hands. But yet it's still a person, an individual that's working together in unity. Not always in peace, because I have parts of me that fight, but there's unity, how it comes together so it works. So when you look at the world, and we're looking at everything that's going on, and you look at the wars between religions, or you look at the hate, unity and getting to that point to me is a journey to wholeness. So wholeness to me is where we bring it all into balance, and it changes, it spirals depending on what your reality is for that day. But it's up to us to find that unity, to find that wholeness, whatever that means for us. It's looking at the world, or at the incident, or at the person, and not going immediately to the negative and what's wrong. Not judging it. It's not that they're full of hate, or their religion does this, or they're advocating that it does that, or that government does that, or that does that. We're all an organism together that we call God, or source, or universal mind. So that would be like my liver saying, well, the heart's acting up today, so I'm going to hate Sandy. It doesn't work. It's still Sandy. And for me to have unity, or peace, or love, or wholeness, somehow I have to bring those two parts of me together so they're working in unity. And that's one of the first steps we have to take if we're going to have peace in the world, or have people to getting along. We have to find a point of communication. We have to have something that breaks the ice, that makes us see each other as human beings, or whatever it is, so that we can talk. If we're polarized when we go in there, there's not going to be any communication. If I let the divide between my heart and any other organ go on, I'm not going to be healthy. We need to recognize that this is the life that we live, that we need to be in unity and at peace with every part of it, with every person, with everything that there is. To have the respect to take the time to look and to listen, to hear what's really happening, to understand what are the fears, what's driving it. It doesn't mean that you have to condone it. It doesn't mean that you have to agree with it. But it's you. We're all mirrors. We're all the same thing working together. Some of us probably are, a cell over here and a cell over there and a cell over that. But somehow we're all talking together. It communicates. We know what's going on around us. If it's not something that we like, we need to find a way to change our perception of it, to change what it is, to change what's happening. And we can only do that within ourselves. So I'm arguing with somebody. Okay, we could argue for forever, but what I've tried to do, and to teach my kids to do, is what's at the end of the tunnel? What are you trying to achieve through this? Do you want to be right and have the last word and be at war? Or do you want to have peace and love and a relationship? And it goes on with, it happens with intangibles. How many of us talk to our cars? Stroke your car. I had a little Volkswagen, that puppy would go anywhere. She had names and I stroked her every day and loved her. But we had a relationship and we respected each other and we worked for each other. We need to do that more. So when you see somebody, you don't immediately go to, oh, they're having a bad hair day. You could go instead to, oh God, don't they have great eyes? We start looking for the part that we can talk about. What do we have that are similarities? So we can break the ice, so we can have the conversations, so we can have the relationships that helps us all work together. It doesn't do us any good to get upset at the banks or the mortgage companies or the credit cards. We cannot like what they're doing, but to get angry about it only harms us, which harms the whole thing, because we're not going to come to a healing through anger. We're not going to come to an agreement through anger. The anger is going to polarize us and put us in a war stance, and that doesn't help anybody. Spending time to make it work, spending time to learn about people, to appreciate people, to appreciate our world. For the longest time when I was a kid, I was afraid of this world. It was a world of lack, deprivation, pain, anger, all of those things. And it took me a long time to realize that was only one part. It wasn't everything. And that if I wanted to be happy, I needed to change my focus and change how I saw this world and how I do it. Look at Tim and Susan. They go to Haiti and they do that. They're looking at, with those people, what do they have in common? How can they help each other? There's a point there of communication, of engagement, of caring, of sharing. That's how we make the difference. By how we go in and we help. And we don't have this list of don'ts or not good enough or not meeting the standards. I think one of the things that hangs us up the most is we have this idea of what perfection should be. This expectation that everyone should be living up to. Everyone should be doing. I saw this when I was in foster care. I had a coworker who, instead of going into homes and seeing what was good and what was good enough and what they had to offer, if they didn't meet her standard of what it should be, there ended up so much strife in those homes that the kids ended up having to go somewhere else. You create what you are. You create what you think. You create the world that your perception tells you the world should look like. So it's up to us to change. Up to us to see the world differently, to see people differently, to see ourselves differently. If I don't have respect for me, I'm not going to have respect for anybody in this room. I'm not going to have respect for anybody in the world. And I'm probably going to end up an angry, bitter old woman. I really don't want to do that. So I had to learn, and I think we all do, that we have to change and make a difference if we don't like what's going on around us. When I look back 20, 30 years ago, I can't imagine that I was ever that person. It just is so foreign to me now that I could say those things or do those things or act that way. And I'm so glad that I'm not that way anymore, because when I turned 50, I decided right then, man, I couldn't do another 50 years like the first 50. It just wasn't going to happen. It was just too miserable and unhappy and all of that. But I had to recognize that I didn't like me or the way I was living, and that I had to do something to change. And we do it by looking, like joking with Rick. You know, we could have said, oh God, he screwed up the song. He doesn't know, he doesn't care. Doesn't he have more respect for us than that, you know? I mean, he's got all this time to do that, right?
Oh, yeah.
Use your bathroom time.
To remove all the stress. I don't care.
Perfect. But we have this humor and this ability to laugh at ourselves. And that's what saves us. That's how we get into being able to see everything and to be able to connect, to create what we want. When you go overseas, my sister's in England. She never came home after she went to Oxford. And she used to be embarrassed when Americans would come over. She said this one time, there was this big, loud-mouthed, obnoxious guy, and he had on suspenders from Fresno State. She was, oh God! But it's this way of going in to someone's home or going into another country. And you go into someone's home, you obey their rules, right? You take your shoes off if they want your shoes off. You don't put your feet up on their good stuff, and you're careful, right? We should do that when we go everywhere. If we go to another country, if we go to anything, and honor whatever their culture is, whatever their beliefs are, and seeing that we're all connected. If we're in the same body, I would really like Rand working with us instead of against us. And it's up to us, each of us individually, to start developing those mindsets, to create the country that we want, to be connected to all the countries of the other world. I used to think, when you think about how did we get here, for years I decided we were two things. We were either a galactic zoo, and the UFOs were coming in to see us, or there was some really rich galactic, landowner who owned the planet. We were his kid's science project, and the kid was failing in school because it was just different. But what I realized in this thing called emotions and this thing called humans is that there's a beauty in all of it. When you think about how things work or how it's meant to be. I mean, I looked for the good to come out of World War II. The thing that I like the best being a woman is it got the woman out of the house and into the workforce. And they never went back home. I would make a terrible housekeeper, a person to stay home all the time. It just wouldn't work for me. And I think a lot of people feel that way. Those things, while they're horrendous, also help us get to where we can make better decisions, where we can have more freedom, where we can do more and be more. So when you go out in the world and you're looking around for what should I be doing, ask yourself, how could I serve? How can I today make somebody's life a better place? How can I give them something that makes them happier, that makes their world better? Is that possible? I think it is. And it's simple things. It doesn't have to cost anything. It's things like smiles. We all can have smiles. It's looking people in the eye. It's respectful and doing respectful things. It's not hard, but it is a discipline. Because we don't just decide today's going to be the day where I'm nice to everybody and then the rest of the week I'm not going to care.